in 2 Chronicles 20, verse 20. And it reads, "And they rose early in the morning and went forth into the wilderness of Tekoa." It is a place that is nestled in between Galilee and Jerusalem, in Tekoa. "And as they went forth, Jehoshaphat stood and said, 'Hear me, O Judah, and you inhabitants of Jerusalem. Believe in the Lord your God, so shall you be established.'" Believe in the Lord your God, so shall you be established. Believe in his prophets, so shall you prosper. Believe in the Lord your God, and you will be established. Believe his prophets, so shall you prosper. The subject that I'm going to use today is clarity in chaos. Clarity in chaos. I'm going to start it out like this. I had an experience with our pastor, Tiffany. She was doing some changes to our website about 3 months ago. And when she did the website changes, she called me so excited. And I had been going on the website and I hadn't seen the changes yet. And she called me so excited. "Oh, Bishop, the changes look so good on there." And I'm thinking, she must have lost her mind. Maybe she, didn't post it, or something technologically was limited. And I said, on my side, I don't see nothing. And she said, "It's up there and it's working." I said, "No, it is not." So we went through this exchange for about 3 or 4 minutes. And, finally, she stopped and she said, "Bishop, did you clear your history?" And I said, "That don't matter. It shouldn't matter. I'm going to the site and it's not showing, and you telling me it's showing. Call the people back." Sometimes in my erratic way, in my bossy way, y'all pray for me. And she was so calm, and she said, "Bishop, I just need you to clear your history." And I reluctantly went and I cleared the history. And this will bless somebody. And immediately I went back out to the site. I couldn't type it fast enough to prove that she was wrong. And when I typed it in, and she was so calm, she wasn't talking back, she wasn't saying anything. She just waited for me to put in the address. And as soon as I pressed go, the new site came up. I got real quiet. And I said, "Oh, it does look good." And I was in total shock. What am I saying to you? Some of you are praying to God for some stuff and you still got your old history blocking it, because there is a pattern that when you go to a certain place, that when God shifts you, you have to clear the history of the old path. You trying to find God in an old path, and God is saying, if I could just get you to clear your spirit, that if you can clear your spirit, you will see things in a whole different perspective. I tell you, clear your history. It is with that basis that I want to talk to you about clarity in chaos. Because some of us are going to God with the perspective of an old history and expecting new experience. And God needs you to understand, before you can understand what I'm doing now, you got to clear your old history. You got to be able to clear what has happened before. Now, when I talk about chaos, chaos is your environment. You do not control your environment, but you control how you are impacted by your environment. See, we think that we have a control over the world, but no, we have a control as to how we interact and we deal with the world. And so chaos is a behavior of systems that follow certain laws but appear to be random and predictable. It is a certain pattern, but it appears, because to the receiver, it appears to be random. But I want you to understand, chaos has a source and comes from somewhere. It is very sensitive, chaos, to small changes, and it leads to unpredictable outcomes. We need to understand that chaos was the term that was used when you dealt with the beginning of the world. For the world was without form and void. In other words, it was chaotic until God began to speak. Chaos happens when it goes against the level of comfort or understanding that we have. Chaos is a perception of the receiver. Follow me. Clarity, however, is a clearness or a lucid approach as to perceiving and understanding something. It is freedom from distinctness or ambiguity. When you have clarity that there is no question as to what you're seeing and what you are experiencing. Follow me. It is the state or quality of being transparent to the eye. So clarity is the way that you need to see as a believer, particularly as everything around you is changing. As everything around you becomes unpredictable, you need clarity, and to the believers, clarity in spirit, so that you don't fall into the realm of what's happening. It is very easy to get pulled into the norm, or what we consider the norm of reaction. You know, I used to look at the news every day. Now I look at it in portions, because what ends up happening is that the way I think, the way I reason, and the way that I respond is based on what I've been constantly taking in. And so therefore, by the way that it's taken in will determine how I will respond. And so when I do that, now there is no distinctness between me and everybody else. Now, being a believer, you're supposed to be different than everybody else. Not different as far as being weird per se, but it is different in the way that the basis of your response is based on the belief system that you operate under. There's a lot of Christians that don't have a belief system based on God and his attributes. They have a belief system based on reaction to what has happened, the circumstances. So therefore, they develop that. I put something out last night and I misspelled it, you know, and I didn't word it quite properly. But what ends up happening here is that people will deal with God purely based on how he delivered them out of chaos. What do you mean by that? When you develop a habit and God delivers you out of chaos, you only can see God in chaos. You only see God in chaos, so therefore your dependency on God, and you can only recognize God when everything is going crazy. When things are going well, or when there is clarity, you don't see God because your anxiety is an attribute of understanding that God is there. I promise you, if you give me 5 minutes, that you will understand what I'm saying. Jehoshaphat in this scripture, there was a norm as to how they gathered and they fought. As a matter of fact, they were in the midst of peace, and then all of a sudden there was chaos that erupted all around them. They got a letter from one of their used-to-be allies saying that we're coming after you and we're going to disrupt what is known as normal to you. And so therefore, Jehoshaphat's response shows what I'm about to teach today. Oftentimes we have, and I'll put it like this, we have a prophet in the house. We understand that the prophets and the leaders and the officers of the church are the mouthpiece of God. Follow me. We understand that they are the mouthpieces of God. However, their effectiveness is based upon our posture with God as to whether what they say will happen. When we have more dependence on the prophets and never deal with God, that there is no reference point for what the prophets and the apostles are saying to become effective in your life. And so now you develop a habit of responses and you don't have a posture to stand upon. Follow me. And so it's almost like you become spiritual ghosts to where you're all zombies. You only respond to reactions or respond to the words from the prophet. The prophet is coming from God, but because you don't have a standing in God, so therefore what they're saying oftentimes don't make sense. You follow blindly and things happen, but they don't happen to the sustenance and the continuity. So therefore you have to keep coming to the prophet because you're not going to God, and now you're relying on the prophets and the apostles to tell you what God should be telling you, and you put the prophet in a compromising position because the prophet is supposed to confirm what God has said and not give you brand new news. I wish I had a church that understood. So therefore we have a welfare mentality that has grown in the church, and now we're on snap because we want the prophets to snap a word rather than God saying something in the prophet echoing what God is saying. Oh, follow me, follow me. Clarity in chaos. I know it takes me a while to go up, but I'm coming. Thank you. So Jehoshaphat did what we should do. We need to understand that clarity does three things. I want you to write this down because too many times we jump and shout and then didn't write anything down, don't have memorization, and then when it starts happening, now you have a memory panic because you're trying to remember what was said. And so clarity does three things. Number one, it creates space. There ought to be a space that the enemy cannot infiltrate because your conviction is like a fence around your spiritual healthiness. And so therefore, what you don't believe don't cross that fence. Follow me. It creates space. So now, when you have clarity, you get rid of panic. You get rid of immediate response all the time because you could see. It's almost like a security system. You could see when somebody's jumped the fence. Number two, identify what matters. When you have clarity, you only align with things that feed your purpose. Oftentimes we align with things that give us answers, but things that don't necessarily align with our purpose. Because there's more proclivity to go to getting rid of the problem more so than establishing a long-standing foundation in yourself. In other words, if the pipes in your house are burst, you don't care that the plumbing system has gone bad in your house. You just want the plumber to come fix that pipe. Even though them fixing the pipe will add pressure somewhere else and it will burst somewhere else later on. You don't care about it right now. You just want to make sure that that pipe right there is fixed. So when you have clarity, there's no hesitation or heartache. Number three, when you have clarity, you take risk. People that don't like to take risks oftentimes have a lazy connotation of faith. What do you mean? It's almost like a baby that is old enough to walk, but they're just not ready to walk yet. And so therefore they want to be carried, even though they have the ability to walk. And when no one else is walking, looking, they try to take steps. But when everybody's looking, they take the posture, pick me up. Some of us, we have the ability, but because everybody's always come to your rescue and come to your cry, then you don't try to walk in faith, you just. But when your clarity is there, you tend to try to take steps regardless as to who's looking. Follow me. So therefore, we need to understand we must first be clear on God's position in our lives before there is clarity in the things we deal with. We look for things we deal with to be clear, and then we'll deal with God later. But what God is saying, I need you to be clear on me now, because it's really going to bypass some heartache in what you're dealing with later. Because if you're not clear on God, then you tend to negotiate things that are non-negotiable. So prophetic direction, and prophetess, I think you'll like this, prophetic direction, when Jehoshaphat was dealing with this and he didn't know, he went to God. And after he went to God, then Jezreel rose up and gave them a prophecy about their outcome. Prophetic direction it comes after solidarity with God. Prophetic direction does not come in place of God. It comes to support the solidarity or the standing that you have with God. Prophetic direction is a revelation about God and how to fulfill his purpose in your life, especially in times of difficulty. We need prophetic direction when we have difficulty in seasons, in times, in strategic positions. All of these things are important in your prophetic direction having sustenance, elevation, and fulfillment. Are you following me so far? This is not a shouting message. This is I'm going to defeat the devil once and for all message. And so we need to understand that prophetic direction comes after the fact. So what are you saying in all of this? The thing about it is, and he says, believe in the Lord your God. That statement in itself troubled me, because we believe in the Lord, but he says, your God. Believe in the Lord your God. So that means that you could believe in the Lord even though he ain't your God. And so if you could believe in the Lord, if he's not your God, then you already know what the relationship is like. It's that you believe in the Lord even though he doesn't have control over your life. And so therefore now it creates an opportunity or an experience to where you only go to God when you need something. But he says, believe in the Lord your God. And it is the Hebrew word aman, meaning that God is the only thing we stand on. That it is a place where God is your only source. God is not the source that you come after everything else has fallen apart, but immediately when things happen, you immediately go to God. God is your only source. It is aman. And he said that believe in the Lord your God and you shall be established. In other words, the word establish is also the echo of the word aman. When you look at it in the Hebrew, aman is also the definition of establish, but it switches the order of the meaning. What it does is that when you have a firm place in God, then you shall be established, you shall be made strong, you shall be of long countenance, that you will have continuance, that you will be steadfast, that you'll be sure, that you'll be trustworthy, that you will be verified. And so you are a strong person, that you are a strong believer. You're not a fly-by-night no more. You have some weight on you that you can handle. It's almost like you built to hurricane code. In other words, you can handle the winds and the waves, and you can handle floating on water for a while, that things will always come out on top. You are strong. But being strong without prophetic direction is just you being strong and being a target in the middle of a minefield. You need to be strong so that when you receive prophetic direction, now you could do some damage. Watch what it says, that believe the prophets. And I want to make this distinction. Don't believe in the prophets, because you're not putting any trust in the prophets. You're believing the prophets are directly connected to God. And what they're saying is coming from God. The reason you know it's coming from God, because you have a connection with God. And you won't get in no $100 line, because God never said in his word, give me a C note and I'll give you a deliverance. And so therefore, you need to understand that you believe the prophets. In other words, I have a surety based on what they're saying, 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 that it sounds just like God. Because whatever God said to me today, they sound the same way. Believe the prophets. Then you shall be prosperous. In other words, you will have movement. The purpose of this message is that you have movement in the midst of this pandemic. There was a prophetic word that both prophetess and Sister Deshay released on Wednesday about being a river and about prospering in a pandemic. See, if you are believing in the Lord but not your God, you're looking for streams in the mailbox. But if you believe in the Lord your God, that God has a way of bringing stuff. See, because God is not limited to the U.S. Postal Service. God can touch because as a matter of fact, the Bible says that he will cause men to give into your bosom. There'll be people that you're walking by that when you are in proper prophetic direction, that God will touch somebody in the midst of Publix, Fresh Market, Whole Foods, that will feel an unction as they walk by you, and whatever the need is shall be met. You're looking for more money in a pandemic. And people that have money cannot avoid the impact of a pandemic. But what God can do, God can cause things to flourish in you, through you, and around you as a result of believing in the Lord your God. Are y'all getting this? And so I have a few minutes left. And so believe the prophets is an extension to your faith, not an establishment of your faith. It's an extension to your faith. Because I believe in the Lord my God, believing the prophets is not a hard thing. People have a deterrence from prophets because of the fact that they trusted the prophets more than God and they led them astray. And so therefore now they put the blame on the prophets rather than the fact of you admitting that you were not properly positioned in God. And so therefore your flesh just moved to what you thought you would feel better about. And so because of that, you have a certain judgment about something that you had to be blamed with yourself. You didn't want to seek God. You just figured, let the prophets do the heavy lifting and I'll just stand there and receive it. But I come to tell you that the prophets, their effectiveness really comes. That's why I'm so grateful that the prophets in my life only release when God ordains. I don't have no anxious prophets in my life, because when people are anxious to give you a word and anxious to give you an answer and don't really assess your posture, then they may give you something that may make you go kill yourself, because you're not adequately built to handle the weight or the magnitude of what they're releasing in your life. They got a half a word and didn't get the rest of it. God probably did tell them, I'm going to give them thus and so, but they didn't stay there for the progressive part and say, but they need to believe in me. Are y'all getting this? It's an extension of your faith. So I need to give you 4 areas that you must have priority in order for clarity to exist. Too many of us are fighting financially, or fighting in our marriage, fighting everything. It seemed like everything was swimming upstream with everything. And it shouldn't be that way, that there should be such a relationship and sweetness about you and God. Even sweetness when he revealed things to you that you really don't need to have in your life. It's still a sweetness, because the way God does surgery is better than anesthesia. God has a way to have you smile even though you're crying about what you discovered. And it's about an alignment, because you're looking at the recovery rather than the process. Oh, I just said something to you right then. Someone that keep rehearsing their hurts is someone that really did not go into surgery yet, that they're still crying about what they're about to lose. But I declare that when you have a connection with God, God will show you an ugliness about you, and you are excited to get rid of it rather than being hesitant and embarrassed. The embarrassment comes from your flesh, but the excitement comes from your spirit, because your spirit is saying, I'm finally going to be able to show that they are with God and that limitation is being removed off their life. I wish I had somebody ready for clarity. Woo. 4 things. Number 1, there has to be agreement. Write that down. Agreement. Agreement. In order for any relationship to work, there has to be agreement. Whether it's friendship, whether it's marriage, whether it's best friends. Some of y'all are best friends with people that don't believe what you believe. So you have more allegiance to the longevity of the connection rather than the worth of it. Woo! There must be agreement. God must be first. He's the only one that can share your space. Don't let nobody talk you into thinking there are certain things, certain parts of my wife's life that I'm equally a part of. But there is a priority that she has with God that I can't be jealous about, and vice versa. Because if I can share everything that God shares, then that makes me equal with God. There's a intimacy in your life that's only between you and God. So there has to be agreement. God said, I'm a jealous God. I won't share my space with anybody. I need you to follow me. Because some of y'all, you'll be delivered from hurt feelings real quick. There needs to be agreement with God. If you are going on a job, whether it's an interview, if you're starting a business, if you're starting a relationship, that there must be agreement between you and God. If God does not agree, then you can't act like you didn't hear his no and then come back and act like you didn't remember that he said no. And now you want to impose on his mercy when his mercy is not a qualifying platform for him to now bless what he rejected in the beginning. Because when God spoke to Samuel about Saul, he said, I rejected him. Samuel was embarrassed of the fact that he was used, and God told Samuel, fill your horn and go and find a replacement. Don't sit up there trying to fix damaged goods. That relationship ain't good no more. Number two, there must be alignment. Number one is agreement. Number two is alignment. Alignment with his offices further ensures your connection with him. How you align with your pastors, with your prophet, with your evangelist, with your pastor and your teacher says is an extension of God, not a replacement for God or a shortcut to God, but an extension from God. Are you understanding me? So there must be alignment. Number three, there must be association, meaning that you need to be connected to those alignments so that the oil that is flowing from your leaders can flow through you. There's a problem in the body of Christ when the leaders are flowing in a particular level and the people that are connected to them don't have that same experience. It is my desire that everybody connected to us flows like us. Number four, there must be arrangement. This is where I had to get excited about, because this is a part that took me a while to commit to. Can I be transparent? Arrangement is a filter system. You only commit to what feeds your assignment. You cannot be connected to something because you think it's a good idea or think they need help. Everybody has to connect to God in their own way. And together, as we're connected to God, there will be fruit. You got to recognize if you are in a connection that is fruitless or that is barren. Because in the sense of that there's a weight that you are carrying that will prevent you from going to where God is calling you to. You got to have that conversation with the people connected to you to say, I'm going here. Either you're going with me or you stay where you're at. Are you hearing me? That in order for clarity, because we're talking about having clarity, some of the cloudiness is based upon the chaos that we're connected to. That if we learn to disconnect and have a filter system and only arrange our lives to only have things that feed into my progression, then we will have success. It's a hard thing because as a pastor, I tend to want to help people that don't even want to help themselves. And what that ends up doing, it delays my assignment because of the fact that I'm trying to help someone that really has no interest in the validity of health and the validity of clarity. They want to stay cloudy, and I don't know how you could be free and chaotic at the same time. Some people like chaos, and until they fall in love with clarity, they will always be sleeping with chaos. So in order to have clarity, you must make a decision to break up with chaos. Stand to your feet. I know this is a little bit heavy, a little bit different, but my heart is connected to your evolution. This is not a you shall survive this, but this is how you get to where God is calling you to. This is how you get there. As you are, even at home, my desire and my prayer is that in the midst of chaos, you can have clarity. So you don't react to what's happening around you, that you will learn to respond to what God is saying to you. Are you hearing me?